What if the biggest obstacle to your success is the belief that you're already right? Think about it. Most people spend their lives trying to prove themselves correct. We defend our opinions. We argue harder. We cling to beliefs even when reality changes. But according to Adam Grant's groundbreaking book, Think Again, the smartest people in the world do something completely different. They rethink. They challenge their own assumptions. They update their beliefs. And instead of treating intelligence like knowing all the answers, they treat intelligence like the ability to keep learning. This book isn't about becoming smarter by collecting more information. It's about becoming wiser by letting go of outdated ideas. And honestly, that's much harder, because changing your mind can feel uncomfortable, sometimes even painful. But Adam Grant argues that the people who thrive in today's rapidly changing world are not the people with the strongest opinions. They're the people most willing to rethink those opinions. In this video, we're going deep into the most powerful lessons from Think Again. You'll discover why intelligent people often become more stubborn, how to escape the trap of certainty, why debates usually fail, how great leaders encourage disagreement, and how learning to rethink can completely transform your career, relationships, and life. So before we begin, ask yourself one question. What belief are you holding on to right now? That MIG. HTB wrong. Let's begin. Adam Grant begins with a fascinating idea. Most of us think confidence is a strength, and sometimes it is. But confidence becomes dangerous when it turns into certainty, because certainty closes the mind. The moment we become convinced we already know the truth, we stop listening, we stop learning, and we stop growing. Grant explains that humans naturally fall into three different mental modes whenever we discuss ideas: the preacher, the prosecutor, and the politician. The preacher mode happens when we defend our beliefs as sacred truths. We act like our opinions are holy. Anyone who disagrees becomes a threat. The prosecutor mode happens when we attack opposing views. We focus on proving other people wrong, not understanding them. And the politician mode? That's when we stop caring about truth altogether. Instead, we just want approval. We say, whatever helps us win support. Sound familiar? Social media is filled with preachers, prosecutors, and politicians. Everyone is defending, attacking, performing, but very few people are actually thinking. Grant says we need a fourth mode, the scientist. Scientists don't build identities around being right. They build identities around discovering truth. A scientist forms a hypothesis, tests it, collects evidence, and if the evidence proves them wrong, they change their mind. That's not weakness. That's intelligence. But humans hate being wrong. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. We naturally search for information that supports what we already believe, and we ignore evidence that challenges us. Imagine two people watching the exact same political debate. Both walk away believing their side won. Why? Because humans don't simply observe reality. We interpret reality through our existing beliefs. Grant shares research showing that highly intelligent people are often even more vulnerable to this problem. Why? Because smarter people are better at constructing arguments. They become more skilled at defending bad ideas. Intelligence can become a tool for rationalization. That's a frightening thought. You can be brilliant and still trapped inside your own assumptions. And that's why rethinking matters. Not because we're stupid, but because being human makes all of us vulnerable to blind spots. The truly dangerous people aren't the ignorant ones. They're the people absolutely convinced and said they cannot be wrong. Think about history. Entire societies once believed the earth was the center of the universe. Doctors once believed washing hands before surgery was unnecessary. Experts dismissed groundbreaking innovations because they sounded impossible. Again and again, certainty delayed progress. And Adam Grant asks a powerful question. If we can clearly see how people in the past were wrong, what beliefs today will future generations laugh at? That question alone can change the way you think forever. If changing our minds is so valuable, why is it so difficult? Because beliefs are tied to identity. We don't just hold opinions. We become attached to them. A political belief becomes part of who we are. A career path becomes part of our identity. A lifestyle becomes a reflection of ourselves. And once our ego becomes connected to an idea, questioning the idea feels like questioning ourselves. Grant explains that humans crave consistency. We want to feel stable, certain, predictable. Changing our mind can feel humiliating, like admitting failure. But Grant flips this idea upside down. He argues that changing your mind should actually be viewed as a sign of growth. Imagine meeting someone who still has the exact same beliefs they had at age 12. Same worldview, same assumptions, same understanding. You wouldn't admire that. You'd wonder why they stopped evolving. Growth requires updating. The world changes. New evidence appears. Technology evolves. Circumstances shift. And if we refuse to rethink, we become outdated. Grant tells the story of BlackBerry. At one point, BlackBerry dominated the smartphone market. They were successful, powerful, confident. But when touchscreens emerged, BlackBerry leaders dismissed them. They believed physical keyboards were essential. Meanwhile, Apple reimagined the future. And because BlackBerry clung too tightly to old assumptions, they collapsed. This happens everywhere. Companies fail because they stop questioning themselves. People fail because they stop adapting. Relationships fail because people stop listening. Rethinking isn't optional anymore. It's survival, especially in a world changing faster every year. The careers that exist today may disappear tomorrow. Skills become obsolete. Industries transform. And the people who thrive are not necessarily the smartest or strongest. They're the most adaptable. Grant introduces an important idea called confident humility. This means having confidence in your ability to learn, while remaining humble enough to admit what you don't know. That balance is powerful. Too much confidence creates arrogance. Too much humility creates insecurity. But confident humility creates curiosity. It allows you to say, I may not know everything. I could be mistaken. There might be a better way. And strangely enough, those words make you wiser, not weaker. Most people see doubt as a negative thing, but Adam Grant says productive doubt can actually become a superpower because doubt forces us to think. Overconfidence creates shortcuts. We assume, we stop questioning. We become mentally lazy, but doubt keeps the mind active. Grant talks about world-class performers who constantly question themselves. The best leaders review their decisions. Elite athletes study mistakes. Great writers revise endlessly. Why? Because mastery requires continuous improvement. The moment someone believes they've already mastered everything, growth stops. Grant shares an incredible example involving NASA. After major disasters, investigators discovered that many warning signs had been ignored. Why? Because people became too confident in existing systems. They stopped questioning assumptions. This phenomenon is called groupthink. Groupthink happens when teams value harmony over honest disagreement. Nobody wants conflict. Nobody wants to sound negative. So people stay silent. And silence becomes dangerous. The best teams aren't the ones where everyone agrees. They're the ones where people feel safe challenging ideas. That's why great leaders encourage dissent. They ask, what am I missing? Who disagrees? What could go wrong? Those questions protect organizations from disaster. Grant explains that successful cultures normalize rethinking. They reward learning, not ego. This lesson applies to personal life too. Many arguments become destructive because both sides are trying to win. Nobody is trying to understand. But what if conversations became collaborative instead of competitive? What if the goal wasn't victory, but discovery? Imagine how different relationships would feel. Instead of saying, you're wrong, you might say, that's interesting. Help me understand why you see it that way. That single shift changes everything. People become defensive when attacked, but they open up when they feel heard. Grant argues that persuasion works best when people convince themselves. not when we force them. And that's why listening is often more powerful than arguing. One of the most fascinating sections of Think Again explores persuasion. Most people think persuasion means overpowering someone with facts, but facts alone rarely change minds. Why? Because beliefs are emotional. People defend identities, communities, values, and fears, not just logic. Grant explains that attacking someone's beliefs directly often backfires. This is called the backfire effect. The harder you push, the harder they resist. Imagine trying to force someone backward physically. What happens? They push back. The same thing happens psychologically. Grant says effective persuasion starts with curiosity. Instead of immediately arguing, ask questions. How did you arrive at that conclusion? What evidence would change your mind? Have you ever doubted this belief? Questions create reflection, and reflection opens doors. Grant shares research showing that motivational interviewing can help people rethink deeply held beliefs. This technique avoids confrontation. Instead, it guides people to examine their own reasoning. For example, instead of saying, "You're wrong about this," you might ask, on a scale from 1 to 10, how certain are you? If someone says 8, ask, why not 10? Suddenly, they begin explaining their own uncertainties. That's powerful, because people trust conclusions they reach themselves far more than conclusions impose on them. Grant also warns against binary thinking. The world is rarely divided into completely right and completely wrong. Reality is messy, complex, nuanced, but social media rewards certainty. Extreme opinions spread faster. Outrage gets attention. As a result, many people lose the ability to hold nuanced views. Grant encourages intellectual complexity. You can support an idea while criticizing parts of it. You can disagree with someone while respecting them. You can change your mind without betraying yourself. That mindset creates healthier conversations and, honestly, healthier societies. One of the most transformative ideas in this book is separating your identity from your opinions. Grant says many people define themselves by beliefs. I'm this kind of person. I belong to this side. I believe this, therefore I am this. But when identity becomes fused with ideology, learning becomes nearly impossible, because admitting you're wrong now feels like destroying part of yourself. So how do we escape this trap? Grant suggests anchoring identity around values instead of opinions. For example, instead of identifying as someone who is always right, identify as someone committed to learning. Instead of pride and certainty, take pride in curiosity. That shift changes everything, because now changing your mind doesn't threaten your identity. It strengthens it. You become proud of growth. Grant shares examples of people who reinvented themselves repeatedly throughout life. Careers changed, beliefs evolved, perspectives deepened, and instead of becoming weaker through change, they became more resilient. This is especially important today. Many people stay trapped in careers they hate because changing direction feels embarrassing. They think, but I've already invested years into this. Grant calls this escalation a commitment. We continue investing in bad decisions simply because we already invested heavily. It's like refusing to leave a terrible movie because you already watched an hour. But time invested in the past should not control the future. Sometimes the bravest decision is rethinking your path. That applies to careers, relationships, habits, dreams, everything. Grant reminds us that humans are works in progress. You are not obligated to remain the person you were 5 years ago. And honestly, that idea is incredibly freeing. Adam Grant also criticizes the way many schools teach students. Traditional education often rewards memorization over thinking. Students are trained to provide correct answers, not ask better questions. As a result, many people become uncomfortable with uncertainty. They see intelligence as proving competence, not exploring possibilities. But Grant argues the future belongs to lifelong learners. In a rapidly changing world, memorized information becomes outdated quickly. The real advantage is adaptability, curiosity, critical thinking. Grant describes teachers who encourage students to rethink assumptions. Instead of punishing mistakes, they normalize revision. Students learn that confusion is not failure. It's part of learning. That mindset is transformative because many adults avoid challenges simply to protect their ego. They don't want to look foolish. But beginners always look imperfect. Every expert was once terrible. The willingness to be temporarily bad at something is the price of growth. Grant encourages people to adopt a beginner's mindset. Approach situations with curiosity instead of certainty. Ask, what can I learn here? That single question can unlock massive personal growth. One of the deepest ideas in Think Again is that success itself can become dangerous. Why? Because success reinforces our existing beliefs. If a strategy worked once, we assume it will always work. That's why successful people sometimes struggle to adapt. Past victories create overconfidence. Grant explains that organizations often become trapped by their own achievements. They protect old systems, ignore warnings, dismiss innovation, and eventually they fall behind. But this doesn't only happen to companies. It happens to individuals too. Someone becomes successful using one method. Then the world changes. But instead of adapting, they cling harder to the past. Grant says we should treat beliefs like temporary tools, not permanent possessions. A useful belief today may become harmful tomorrow. That doesn't mean we abandon principles. It means we remain flexible. And flexibility is not weakness. It's survival. Grant encourages regular life audits. Ask yourself, what assumptions am I making? What beliefs might be outdated? What would I do differently if I started from scratch today? Those questions can reveal blind spots. Sometimes the biggest breakthrough comes not from learning something new, but from unlearning something old. So, how can we actually become better at rethinking? Grant offers several practical strategies. First, seek disagreement. Most people surround themselves with people who think similarly. That feels comfortable. But comfort limits growth. You need people willing to challenge you honestly, not flatter you. Grant recommends building a challenge network. These are people who care enough to tell you when you're wrong. Not enemies, not critics, trusted truth tellers. Second, separate confidence from certainty. You can be confident in your ability to learn without pretending you already know everything. Third, practice saying, I don't know. Those 3 words are surprisingly powerful because they create space for curiosity. Fourth, actively search for evidence that challenges your beliefs. Don't only consume information that confirms your worldview. Read opposing perspectives. Listen carefully, not because every opposing opinion is correct, but because intellectual humility requires exposure to different viewpoints. Fifth, rethink your future regularly. Many people create rigid life plans, but life changes. New opportunities appear. Unexpected passions emerge. Grant encourages flexibility. A plan should guide you, not imprison you. And finally, remember that changing your mind is not failure. It's evidence that you're learning. Near the heart of this book lies one of its most powerful truths. The goal of life is not to become right forever. The goal is to keep getting closer to truth. And those are very different things. People obsessed with being right protect their ego. People committed to truth protect their curiosity. One closes the mind. The other opens it. Adam Grant argues that rethinking is a lifelong process. There is no final stage where we suddenly know everything. Even experts remain vulnerable to blind spots. That realization should make us humble, but also hopeful. Because if humans can learn, humans can improve. We can rethink destructive beliefs. We can improve systems. We can evolve. And perhaps the most important thing we can teach future generations is not blind confidence, but intellectual humility, the courage to say, I might be wrong. That sentence can change relationships, careers, politics, societies, even history. So here's the challenge Adam Grant leaves us with. What belief in your life deserves a second look? Maybe it's a career path. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's an assumption about yourself. Maybe it's a fear. Whatever it is, don't be afraid to rethink it, because growth begins the moment certainty ends. The people who thrive in the future will not be those who stubbornly cling to old ideas. They'll be the people brave enough to evolve. And maybe true intelligence isn't about having all the answers. Maybe it's about remaining curious enough to keep asking better questions. And that if you enjoyed this deep dive into Think Again by Adam Grant, make sure to subscribe for more powerful book summaries, philosophy, psychology, and life-changing ideas. And before you go, leave a comment answering this question. What's one belief you changed your mind about recently? Thanks for listening. And remember, sometimes the smartest thing you can say is, I need to think again.